Alright, so before we get into tonight's stories, I just want to say every single one of these was sent in by a real person. Real name, real location, real experience. Some of them reached out through the community tab, some through the Discord, and a couple came through email. I read every single one, and I'll be honest with you. A few of these kept me up at night just reading them. And I don't say that lightly. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, and let's get into it. The first one comes from a woman named Mara. She's a middle school art teacher from Columbus, Ohio. She booked a long weekend at a cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina, solo trip, just her and her sketchbook. She said she almost didn't send this in because she thought people wouldn't believe her. Mara, I believe you, and I think after tonight, everyone watching will too. Here's her story, in her words, the way she told it to me. The listing looked perfect. And I mean that in the way that should have been a red flag in itself. It looked almost too perfect. The photos were warm and golden. All natural wood interiors and a stone fireplace, and this wraparound porch that looked out over the Blue Ridge Mountains. 4.9 stars. 47 reviews. Every single one glowing. The host's name was Dale. Profile photo showed a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, flannel shirt, big smile. His bio said he'd been hosting for 6 years, that he loved the outdoors, that he built the cabin himself with his father back in 2009. I remember reading that and thinking, this is exactly what I need right now. I drove down from Columbus on a Friday afternoon in October. Beautiful drive. The leaves were changing and the sky was that particular shade of gray that makes fall feel cinematic. I pulled onto the gravel road leading up to the property around 4:30, and the cabin was exactly what the photos promised. Maybe even better. It sat on about 2 acres of cleared land, surrounded by dense tree line on 3 sides, with the mountain view opening up to the south. There was a covered porch with a wooden rocking chair on it, and a small fire pit out front, and it felt like I'd made the right call. I used the lockbox code Dale had messaged me through the app. The key came out smooth, the door swung open, and the inside smelled like cedar and something faintly smoky, like the fireplace had been used recently, which made sense. It was October. Probably the guests before me had a fire going. I spent the first night completely at ease. Made dinner, opened a bottle of wine, did some sketching by the window. I slept better than I had in months. Saturday is where things started to feel off. I woke up around 7 and went to make coffee. The kitchen was small but functional, and there was a little note on the counter in Dale's handwriting welcoming me and explaining where everything was. Coffee was in the cabinet above the pot. Filters to the left. All the usual stuff. I poured myself a cup and stepped out onto the porch. That's when I noticed the truck. It was parked at the far edge of the gravel lot, just at the point where the tree line started. A dark green Ford, older model, a little mud on the wheel wells. I hadn't noticed it the night before because I'd arrived in the dark and gone straight inside. But now, standing on the porch in the morning light with my coffee, it was just there. And it struck me as strange because the nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. There was no reason for a random truck to be parked at the edge of this property. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Dale had left it there. Maybe it belonged to someone who maintained the property. I went back inside and got on with my morning. Around noon, I decided to take a walk on the trail that looped around the back of the property. It was marked on a little hand-drawn map that Dale had left in a binder on the coffee table, along with local restaurant recommendations and a section labeled Important Notes. I'd glanced at it the night before but hadn't. Read it carefully. I picked it up now and actually read through it. Most of it was standard stuff. Don't leave food out because of bears. Trash pickup was Tuesday. The Wi-Fi router sometimes needed a restart. But then there was one line near the bottom of the last page, handwritten in slightly different ink, like it had been added later. It said, Please do not enter the storage shed behind the cabin. Private. I looked up from the binder. I hadn't noticed a shed. I went to the back window and looked out across the yard. Sure enough, maybe 30 feet back, half hidden by the overgrowth of the tree line, was a small wooden structure. Dark, weathered. The door was facing away from the cabin, so I couldn't see if it was padlocked or anything. It blended into the woods so well I genuinely missed it the day before. I told myself that was completely normal. Hosts have personal storage. Tools, holiday decorations, lawn equipment, whatever. Not my business. I went on my walk, enjoyed the trail, came back, and spent the afternoon painting on the porch. But here's the thing about that note. Kept coming back to me. Not because of the shed itself, but because of the ink. The way it was clearly written at a different time than the rest of the page. Like it was added specifically for this visit or this guest. And I couldn't shake the question of why Dale would feel the need to add it at all. If it was just tools and lawn stuff, why mention it? Why not let a guest just find a locked shed and move on without a second thought? Because they might hear something my brain helpfully supplied. And I immediately told that thought to shut up. Saturday night. I'm inside, fire going, reading. This may be 9:30. The wind had picked up outside and the trees were doing that thing where they sound like rushing water, which I normally love. I was deep in my book when I heard a sound from somewhere behind the cabin. A door. Not my cabin door. Something heavier, slower. I put my book down and listened. Wind. Trees. Then nothing. I sat very still for about 30 seconds, then got up and went to the back window. It was dark outside and the porch light only reached about 10 feet out. Couldn't see much. The shape of the shed was just barely visible, darker than the surrounding dark. I watched for a while. Nothing moved. I went back to my chair and picked my book back up and told myself it was the wind rattling the shed. Then my phone buzzed. A message through the Airbnb app. From Dale. Hey Mara. Hope you're enjoying the cabin. Just wanted to check in and make sure everything's comfortable for you. Let me know if you need anything at all. Normal message. Friendly. Hosts do that. But the timestamp sent a slow crawl up the back of my neck. The message had been sent at 9:34 p.m., which meant Dale was on his phone at 9:34 p.m., which meant Dale was awake. I messaged back that everything was great, thank you, and set my phone down. And then I just sat there and thought about that truck. The green Ford that had been there since this morning. Still there when I checked before dinner. Hadn't moved. I went to the front window and looked out at the parking area. The truck was still there. Now I want to be clear about what I did next, because I think about it every time I tell this story. I didn't panic. I'm a practical person. I made a list in my head of every innocent explanation for everything I'd noticed, and I told myself that list was probably correct. Old truck left by a property worker. Shed full of yard equipment. Host doing a normal check-in message. All of it normal, but I locked both doors and every window, and I slept with my car keys on the nightstand. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6. Something felt different, but I couldn't place it immediately. I lay there for a moment and then realized the truck was gone. I could tell just from the light coming through the front window, the way it reflected off the gravel differently when there wasn't a large object parked at the edge of it. I got up and confirmed it. Gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for 24 hours. I made coffee. I sat on the porch. I felt the relief wash over me and felt a little silly for getting spooked. I even laughed at myself a little. Around 10, I decided to pack up and head out a few hours early. Not because I was scared anymore, just I'd gotten what I came for. I was ready to go home. I loaded my car, did a walkthrough of the cabin to make sure I had everything, and as I was about to pull the front door shut behind me, I thought about the binder. I'd left it open on the coffee table. I went back in, closed it, and set it neatly where I'd found it. And then, I don't know why, I opened it again, to that last page. The one with the handwritten note about the shed. The ink looked different in the morning light. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight and held it close to the page. And I could see it now clearly. The words, "Please do not enter the storage shed behind the cabin. Private." But underneath them, very faint, like someone had tried to erase it or it had been pressed through from another page, were 4 words I had to tilt the paper to read. "He stays out there." I stood in that cabin for maybe 5 seconds completely still. Then I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove straight to the highway without looking back. I reported it to Airbnb that afternoon, sent a photo of the page. They removed the listing within 48 hours, which honestly told me everything about how seriously they took it. I never got a full explanation. I don't know who he was. I don't know if it was Dale himself staying in that shed. I don't know if it was someone else entirely. But I think about the sound I heard Saturday night. That slow, heavy door. And I'm glad I never turned on the back porch light to get a better look. Man, Mara, thank you for sending that in. The detail about the ink, I read that 3 times when I first got it. That is the kind of thing that changes the whole shape of a story in 1 sentence. You did everything right. You got out. You reported it. I just hope nobody else stayed in that cabin between her visit and when they pulled it down. Okay, I need a second, because the next one is a completely different kind of unsettling. This one was sent in by a guy named Trevor. He's a freelance web developer from Portland, Oregon. He was traveling alone through the Texas Hill Country and booked what he thought was a private casita on a family ranch property. Trevor's not easily rattled. He told me up front, "I don't scare easy." He was rattled. I found the listing on a Tuesday night at like 11 p.m., which is already how you know I wasn't making the most careful decisions. I was in the middle of a solo road trip through Texas, Austin to San Antonio to Fredericksburg, and I'd been camping most of the way, but I wanted one night in an actual bed. One night with a shower and air conditioning and a door that wasn't a tent zipper. The listing was for a private casita on what was described as a working cattle ranch about 12 miles outside of Comfort, Texas. If you don't know Comfort, it's a tiny hill country town, very charming, very German immigrant history, lots of antiquing and wine tourists on weekends. The casita looked simple but clean. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, small living area, little kitchenette. Covered porch with a view of a stock pond. It was $68 a night and had about 20 reviews, mostly 4 and 5 stars. A few people mentioned it was remote and the road in was rough, which they treated as a selling point. Solitude and all that. The host's name was Judith. Her profile photo was a woman who looked to be in her mid-60s, standing in front of a barn, cowboy hat, wide smile. Her response rate was 100% and her reviews as a host were all positive. People said she was warm, that she'd leave fresh eggs from the property chickens, that she was a genuinely lovely person who respected her guests' privacy. I booked it, got the check-in details, and drove out the next afternoon. The road in was exactly as advertised, rough. About 3 miles of caliche gravel off the county road, winding through cedar and live oak. I passed through a cattle gate that I had to get out and open and close myself, which the listing had mentioned. The casita was set about a 1/4 mile from the main ranch house. I could see the house from the casita, low limestone, old mesquite trees in front of it, a couple of trucks parked outside. But the casita itself was positioned so that it felt separate, private, like they'd thought about that intentionally. Judith was on the porch of the main house when I pulled up to the casita. She waved from a distance. I waved back. She didn't come over, which I appreciated. I'm not a small talk guy when I'm road tripping. I just want to settle in. I unlocked the casita with the code, stepped inside. Clean. Not fancy, but genuinely clean. There was a small card on the kitchen counter that said "Welcome, Trevor," in neat handwriting, and a half-dozen brown eggs in a little wire basket next to the coffee maker. Real ones, still warm. I'm not kidding. Still warm. Which meant someone had been in there fairly recently before I arrived. That's fine. Hosting stuff. I dropped my bag, showered, changed, and sat on the porch for a while, watching the stock pond turn gold in the late light. Cattle egrets were working the far edge of it. Red-tailed hawk riding a thermal above the cedar ridge. I was genuinely relaxed. It was one of those moments you drive 12 miles of caliche for. I went to bed around 10 and slept fine. Next morning, I woke up early and did something I almost never do. I poked around. Not in a nosy way, just the way you do when you're curious and killing time before coffee kicks in. Opened a few kitchen cabinets. Checked out the little bookshelf in the living area, which had a mix of old Louis L'Amour paperbacks and a couple of bird identification guides. Then I noticed the closet door. It was in the short hallway between the bathroom and the bedroom. Standard bifold door, nothing unusual looking. Except when I went to open it, expecting to maybe find extra towels or blankets. It didn't open. Not locked in the way a doorknob lock works. It opened maybe 2 inches and then stopped, like something was holding it from the outside. I went around the corner to see if there was some latch or peg I was missing on the outside of the door. There was a sliding bolt on the outside of the bifold door, the kind you'd put on a gate, and it was currently slid shut. I stood there and looked at it for a moment. Okay, weird, but like people do weird things with storage. Maybe she stored something in there she didn't want guests messing with. Maybe it was animal feed and she was worried about attracting pests. I slid the bolt opened the door. Just shelves. Extra linens, some cleaning supplies, a box of light bulbs. Nothing that made any sense to keep locked. I didn't think too much of it. Closed the door. Left the bolt open this time. Made breakfast. Took a short walk down to the stock pond. Watched the cattle work the far pasture for a while. Came back around 9:30. And here's where I have to start paying attention to the sequence because it matters. I came back and the closet door was bolted shut again. The bolt that I had slid open and left open before my walk. Slid shut again. I had been gone maybe 40 minutes. I had locked the casita door behind me. Keyed lock, not just the code panel, the actual keyed deadbolt. And the windows were all closed because the AC was running. There was only one door in and out of that casita. Someone had been inside while I was gone. Now, I'm telling myself Judith has a key, which of course she does. She's the host, this is her property. Maybe she came in to swap out the towels or something and just, out of habit, slid that bolt back. But my gut was doing that thing where it just won't let you settle, you know? That low-frequency alarm that doesn't have a reason yet. I looked around more carefully this time. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Bed, bathroom, kitchen, nothing out of place. I went outside and checked around the exterior of the casita. That's when I found the second one. On the outside of the bedroom window, not the inside, the outside, someone had installed a simple hook and eye latch. The kind you'd use to keep a screen door closed. It was latched, meaning the window could be raised but only about half an inch before the latch stopped it. Latched from outside. I walked the entire exterior of the casita. Every window had one. Every single window latched on the outside, so that none of them could be fully opened from within. And then I looked at the front door, which I'd been using the whole time without thinking about it. But now I looked at it carefully. The deadbolt was a single cylinder. One keyhole on the outside. On the inside, the thumb turn you'd expect. Normal. But the door frame on the outside had a heavy hasp installed on it, the kind you'd put a padlock through. No padlock in it right now. But the hasp was there. This casita, if someone put a padlock through that hasp on the outside, could be locked from the outside so that the person inside couldn't get out. Even with the thumb turn on the deadbolt. because the hasp would hold the door shut regardless. I went back inside and I sat down on the edge of the bed and I just thought about it clearly and methodically. Every window latched from outside. Front door could be padlocked from outside. Interior closet bolted from outside. And that bolt had been relatched while I was gone, meaning someone had been in here in the last 40 minutes and I hadn't seen anyone come or go. I picked up my phone to check the Airbnb app and see if there was a message from Judith explaining anything. No message. I pulled up the listing again and scrolled through all the reviews looking for anything that felt off. Most of them were warm and uneventful, but I found one. Buried near the bottom, older, 2 stars, where the guest had written something vague. Felt monitored. Wouldn't stay again. That was the entire review. No other context. I called a friend back in Portland while I packed my bag. I didn't tell her all the details. I just said I was checking out early and driving to San Antonio. She asked if everything was okay, and I said, yeah, I think so. I just got a weird feeling about the place. I loaded the car in about 8 minutes. As I was pulling around to leave, Judith came off the porch of the main house and walked toward me. Slow, easy walk. Smiling. She was carrying something. I thought at first it was a basket, but it was just a cloth bag. She said, "Leaving early?" I said, "Yeah, change of plans. Heading to San Antonio." She nodded, still smiling. Said, "Did you find everything okay in there?" I said, "Yes, everything was great. Thank you for the eggs." She looked at me for a moment, just a second or two longer than a normal response pause, and then said, "You know, most folks don't even notice." Then she turned and walked back to the house. I drove out through the cedar and the caliche and through the cattle gate and didn't stop until I hit the interstate. I filed a report with Airbnb and sent them photos of all the external hardware. I wrote every detail in the report. I don't know if anything came of it. The listing is still up as of the last time I checked, which makes me feel sick. I don't know what Judith was doing. I don't know what those locks were for. Maybe there's an innocent explanation I'm not seeing. But she said most folks don't even notice, which means some do, and she's just fine with that. Okay, I've sat with that story a lot. Most folks don't even notice. Trevor, man. The fact that you did your walkthrough of that exterior, most people would never think to do that. That detail-oriented brain of yours probably saved you from something I don't even want to name. I need to breathe for a second before the next one, because this last story is something else entirely. This one was sent in by a couple, Marcus and his wife, Diane. They're both nurses from Memphis, Tennessee, and they booked a beach house in Gulf Shores, Alabama for their anniversary. And honestly, what started as the most normal, romantic trip you can imagine turned into something that followed them all the way home. Marcus told me he almost didn't book the place because Diane said something felt off about the host's response time. Too fast, she said. Like they'd been waiting. He talked her into it. He's told me that detail still bothers him. So has she. Here's the story. We'd been planning this trip for 4 months. 5th anniversary. First trip without the kids since our youngest was born. We'd been doing the overnight shifts, the double shifts, the 12 hours on 4 hours off marathon of working as nurses through a stretch that just, it wears on you in ways that are hard to explain unless you've done it. We needed this. We were going to Gulf Shores, we'd rented a beautiful house right on the beach, and we were going to sleep in and eat too much seafood and just exist for 5 days. The listing was a 3-bedroom beach house, elevated on stilts in the traditional Gulf Coast style, with a wraparound deck and a private walkway to the beach. It was priced at the higher end, but the photos were stunning and the reviews were exceptional. 96 reviews, average 4.8. The host's name was Ray, and his communication was prompt and professional. He answered Diane's questions about parking and the outdoor shower within minutes every time. We drove down from Memphis on a Saturday morning. Got in around 3 in the afternoon. The house was exactly as pictured, maybe even a little more beautiful in person. The way beach houses always look different when you can smell the salt air and feel the wind. We unloaded the car, cracked the windows, and just stood on the deck for about 10 minutes doing nothing except breathing. The neighborhood was a normal Gulf Shores beachfront street. Houses close together in that way beach communities do, everybody using every inch of lot they've got. The house directly to our left was a white and teal two-story, nice enough, with a screened porch on the front. The house to the right was dark, appeared empty for the week. The neighborhood felt quiet, mostly vacation rentals, families, low-key. That evening we walked down to the beach, watched the sunset, came back, ordered delivery from a local seafood place, and ate on the deck. It was perfect, genuinely perfect. I keep saying that because it matters. The setup was perfect. Nothing to complain about, nothing to question. We went to bed happy. Sunday morning. We're drinking coffee on the deck, and a man comes out of the white and teal house next door onto his screened porch. He's maybe 60, heavyset, baseball cap, coffee cup in hand. He sees us and raises his cup in a neighborly greeting, the universal beach morning salute. We raised ours back. He said, "Morning. You folks enjoy the sunset last night?" We said, "Yeah, it was beautiful." He said, "Marcus, you're gonna love it when the conditions are right and the water goes green like glass. Best lights in the morning if you haven't been out yet." And Diane and I both went still at the same time, because we had not introduced ourselves. We had not told this man my name. We had no identifying information visible from his porch. Our car was parked beneath the house, not visible from his angle. He said my name, Marcus. I looked at Diane. She was looking at me with that very calm, very controlled face she gets when something is wrong, but she doesn't want to react visibly yet. Nurse face, I call it. She's trained to not let alarm show. I said, "Sorry, have we met? I'm not sure I caught your name." He smiled, said, "Bobby. I'm over here most weekends. Been neighbors with Ray's place for years." He said it easy, casual, like the name thing hadn't happened at all. I said, "Good to meet you, Bobby," and left it there. We went inside. Diane said immediately, in a low voice, "How did he know your name?" I thought about it. Could I have missed something? Had we put our names somewhere visible? Luggage tag? Something on the porch? No, nothing. I hadn't even posted on social media yet that we were in Gulf Shores. I hadn't tagged our location anywhere. The Airbnb reservation was under my name. Yes, but that information stays with the host, not with neighbors. Unless the host shared it. I messaged Ray through the app, kept it friendly and casual. Said something like, "Hey Ray, quick question. Our neighbor Bobby introduced himself this morning and seemed to know my name. Just curious if you guys share guest info with neighbors for any reason." Ray responded within 4 minutes. He said, "Ha, Bobby's great. Isn't he? He's been next door for years. He kind of keeps an eye on things for me when I'm not around. I might have mentioned your name so he'd know who was renting this week. Hope that's okay." Okay. On its surface, that's explainable. A lot of hosts have a trusted neighbor who watches the property. That's actually pretty common. But something about it still pulled at me, and I couldn't fully say why until Diane pointed it out. She said, "He said your name, not our names, not the couple, just you, Marcus, singular." She was right. Bobby had said Marcus. Like he knew there were two of us but had specifically been told my name, as if I was the one to watch for, or the one to identify. We didn't want to ruin the trip over it. We went to the beach. We had a good day, but we were quieter than we'd planned on being, both kind of chewing on it separately. Monday night. Couldn't sleep. This happens to me sometimes. Occupational side effect, my brain doesn't really know how to turn off fully. I was up around 2 in the morning. went to the kitchen to get some water, and noticed something through the front window. A light on Bobby's screened porch. Not the overhead light, a small lamp, or maybe a phone screen. Hard to tell. But the shape of someone sitting out there in the dark, facing our house. 2 in the morning. I stood in the dark kitchen and watched for a few minutes. The shape didn't move, just sitting, facing toward the rental. I told Diane about it in the morning. She didn't say I told you so. She just said, I want to check something. She went through the house slowly, room by room, just looking. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, and for the first 2 rooms she didn't find anything. But in the 3rd bedroom, the one we weren't using, the one with the window that faced directly toward Bobby's house, she found it. On the windowsill, positioned facing out, was a small device. Black, rectangular, about the size of a thick thumb drive. She didn't touch it. She took photos of it from multiple angles, close up. Then she came and got me. We looked at the photos together. Neither of us is a tech person in that specialized sense, but we both have enough practical knowledge to know what we were looking at. It was a small camera, pointed out the window, at Bobby's house, or pointed from Bobby's house, depending on how you thought about the angles. I went through every other room. I found 2 more. One in the living room, positioned near a decorative wooden bowl on a shelf, angled toward the interior of the room. One in the master bedroom, which was the room where we'd been sleeping, tucked into the upper corner of a bookshelf headboard, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. We had been in this house for 3 days. Diane is the calmer of the 2 of us in real-life emergencies. It's the nursing. She said, don't touch anything. Take photos of everything. Call the non-emergency sheriff line. We did exactly that. We packed our things into the car first, then called Baldwin County Sheriff's Office. 2 deputies arrived within 30 minutes. They took the situation seriously immediately, which I was grateful for. They documented everything, photographed everything, made calls. One of them stepped outside and I saw him walk toward Bobby's house, and I watched through the window as Bobby answered the door, and I watched Bobby's face go through about 4 different expressions in quick succession before settling on something I can only describe as cooperative resignation. The deputies came back and told us they were going to need us to come down to the station and make a statement. They also told us, and I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't know the legal details of what happened after, that they had reason to believe the cameras were recording to a local device somewhere on or near the property. We never went back inside that house. We stayed in a regular hotel in Orange Beach that night and drove home to Memphis the next morning. Airbnb refunded us fully, and I believe the listing was pulled. There were legal proceedings afterward that I can't fully speak to because we were told to let the investigators handle it. What I can say is that we gave our full statement, we provided all our photos, and we cooperated completely. What I think about is the reviews. 96 reviews, 4.8 stars. All those people who went to that house, who slept in that room, who never thought to look at the bookshelf headboard. All those people who probably thought the weekend was perfect. We don't do Airbnb anymore. It's hotels only. I don't care about the price difference. Some things you can't put a dollar amount on. Marcus and Diane, I'm so sorry that happened to you. On your anniversary. In a place where you were supposed to just exist and breathe for 5 days. I genuinely hope the legal process delivered something meaningful, and I hope you two got to properly celebrate that anniversary at some point. Look, if there's anything tonight's stories teach you, it's this. Check the rooms. Look at the shelves. Look at the windowsills. Look at the door frames and the window latches and read the notes in the binder carefully. The warning signs are almost always there. They're just small, and we're wired to explain them away because we want the vacation to be fine. We want the cabin to be perfect. Sometimes it is. Most of the time it is. But sometimes you're Mara reading that note by flashlight, or Trevor walking the exterior of that casita, or Diane moving quietly through a room she wasn't sleeping in. And those moments, those small moments of paying attention, those are the ones that matter. If you have a story you want to share, the Discord link is in the description. I read everything that comes in, and if it's half as unsettling as what I got tonight, yeah, we'll talk. Stay safe out there. Lock your doors, and I'll see you in the next one.